Good morning, and thank you for joining today's BCarm webinar, How to Drive Cost and Friction Out of the Health and Safety Process. You're listening to Izzy, Marketing Manager, and today we'll hear from Steve Williams, Managing Director, and our guest speaker, Andy Slade, Health and Safety, Environment and Quality Manager at Selecta UK, which is Europe's leading vending and self-service machine retailer. For those that don't know BCarm, we believe risk management is more than just compliance and protection. We provide flexible risk management solutions and best practice advice that can help you to improve your operational performance, enhance employee engagement, and adds to your competitive advantage. Right now, we're finding many companies are in the throes of reviewing their health and safety processes. So our webinar today will aim to tackle two of the biggest barriers to that process, which is cost and friction. Before I hand you over, just some housekeeping. Your mics are automatically muted, but please do ask questions anytime in the Q&A panel, which is at the bottom of the screen, and we'll answer these at the end. The recording from today will be available afterwards. So right now, I'm going to hand you over to Steve to start.
Hi, thanks, Izzy, and good morning, everybody. So thank you for joining us today. What we want to cover in this webinar, and for those of you who have attended our webinars before, you'll know that we like to try and keep these short and sharp and to the point. So 30 minutes is, we first need to look at what are the causes of friction cost in the health and safety process, and then how that impacts on the efficacy of the overall management system. I'm going to be joined then by Andy Slade, and we'll have a conversation about some of the challenges he faces in an organisation of his size. And then we're going to reflect upon how you can get rid of that cost and friction with a kind of system-based approach. And my starting point for this is that if you've got a management system that by its very nature is cumbersome to use, difficult to engage with, then not only will there be friction and cost to that system, but that in itself will impact on its performance. It will actually reduce its effectiveness in protecting the people and the organization. So if you've got a system that works well, that can be used readily and easily across your organization, actually they are big barriers to safety process removed. But actually there are significant potential cost benefits as well. And we will touch on some of those cost benefits at the end with some case studies. So for those of you who don't know BCarm, if you're new to us, very briefly, we are a risk management solution provider, primarily focusing in business continuity, health and safety, environmental risk management. We provide a we like to think, a unique combination of cloud-based risk management systems, similar to what you might get from a SaaS provider, but we're not a SaaS provider. A flexible risk consultancy model where we can build the program around the exact needs on an almost pay-as-you-go basis. And then engagement, we don't know another name for it, but it's our approach of providing continuous support to our clients throughout their lifetime with us, to get them not just up and running, but to operationally embed our solutions into their business and maximize the return on investment that they get. So what are the causes of friction and cost? Well, if we were to sit down in a room and list these out, we might be able to fill up a couple of flip charts. But in kind of stepping back and looking at these, for me, there's kind of four areas. One is the requirement for records and an audit trail. So, and that's important both in terms of being able to evidence what we do to the HSE, but also from a claims defensibility perspective as well. Far too many employees' liability claims are paid simply because there are inadequate records. Secondly is the ongoing activity to required to maintain safety arrangements. I mean, if you actually sat down and listed out everything that needs to be done, it's vast, it's complex, it's not straightforward. Thirdly is that most of that activity has a number of components as well. So, and these components all need to work together. So if you take a risk assessment, and if you're monitoring a risk assessment to ensure all of those control measures are in place, well, you could have 10, 15, 20 control measures there. And that's just one part of the safety sampling within a safety management system. And finally, the fact that in the ideal world, safety needs to involve a wide number of individuals in a business for it to be effective. And far too often we see safety being pulled back to just one individual to minimize the kind of operational impact on the rest of the organization. And that's almost a sign that you've got something that doesn't work as well as it could. And what are the impacts of high friction and cost? Well, you'll all have your own versions of this. For me, again, you know, the poor or inadequate records, you know, as I've already mentioned, can lead to issues around claims defensibility and HC intervention. And of course, there's a more insidious aspect of claims defensibility, and that's where an organization begins to develop a claims culture, and that can really eat at the heart of an organization and the relationship between the management and workforce. But there's another side to that as well, which perhaps is not always recognized unless you're selling your business. And that's that particularly if you have if you're involved in a heavier trade where there is higher degree of risk, then anyone buying your business is going to be interested in the quality of the safety organization and the records that you have, because that will give them some sense of certainty whether they're picking up that liability on an ongoing basis the day after the contract is signed. And we've certainly seen clients who have benefited from having robust records that they've been able to take into the data room as part of a business sale or refinancing. The second part is that kind of reduced effectiveness of the management system. So if it doesn't work as well as it could do, it will reduce the level of risk protection, you know, which it is supposed to achieve. So it reduces that effectiveness. Thirdly, and it is the lack of engagement from the business. So again, this is where safety ends up being pulled back to one individual. And where that's happening because it's perceived to be an operational impact, then actually that starts to feed into a negative culture towards safety, and that's always unproductive. But probably one of the biggest ones, and I think this is something that Andy will touch on later, is that of visibility and accountability. If you run a business, it's one of those God-given things. People focus on what they know the boss can see, you know, and what gets counted gets done. You know, what gets measured gets done, and that again is a very difficult thing to achieve, where you know, in any kind of management system that isn't fully joined up with strong, robust reporting procedures. And that again can then lead to these lower levels of engagement within the organization. And if there's lower levels of engagement, that then impacts on the effectiveness of protection that the management system is supposed to deliver. So I'm really grateful to Andy for joining us today. I thought rather than just our perspective as someone who's delivered these solutions, it'd be really useful to hear from a safety practitioner who has a job on his hands, managing a high number of locations, employees, a good percentage of which are actually out mobile and on the road. So Andy, thank you. Thanks very much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Steve.
So Andy, I've got some questions that I wanted to run through with you. And kind of the first one really was, can you kind of just give us a flavour for what safety looks like in Selecta in terms of, you know, what you're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis?
To give you a feel for the company, as you know, we're Europe's leading vending and office services company with regard to hubs and vending machines, coffee machines. on the high street. We serve this from 17 regional offices currently, with around 1,500 staff, most of whom are field-based, so they're remote working, field-based staff, which adds its own additional challenges. As a business, we're heavily dependent on technology for communications with our staff to maintain their route activities and visit activities. So having a technology-based safety system sort of integrates well within that. Our activities are fairly diverse, not only into traditional sort of filling and cleaning vending machines, but also traditional coffee machines on high streets, working in hospitals, which brings its own challenges currently. But the majority of our work is also on other people's sites. So we're continuously being required to provide information to clients to demonstrate that we have a system in place for those as well. So we operate call centres, offices and warehouse operations also in our own premises across the UK. So we have a wide range of activities involved.
So Andy, we've obviously worked together for a few years now, but
yeah.
I was very much interested in your perspective on kind of like pre-BCarm. What were the kind of the operational challenges that you were having to deal with on a daily basis?
Some of those still exist even with BCarm, but compliance and consistency is always a challenge. So getting people to buy into a system, as you said. Previous to having BCarm, we had effectively a hard copy health and safety manual, which prior to the intranet being introduced was actually physically a big tome of we used to call it a safety Bible, if you like, which used to sit in the office in each of the regions, which had then to be updated physically by someone. So you'd send out an updated policy or a risk assessment. Somebody would then have to print it, put it in the manual. And these manuals in the traditional thing was something you blew the dust off every time you went on a site visit. Training delivery was equally challenging. Even though we had PowerPoint presentations or packages, these have to be written, they have to be checked, they have to be sent out then for a regional team to manage and to deliver the training, and then recording effective training records. And sometimes that could be quite inconsistent and challenging. And as you rightly said, trying to find a record when you needed it to prove diligence was equally challenging. So challenge everywhere was consistency, use of application, and then checking on people using the stuff properly and collecting the right records. All of that now is much easier. So less challenging, but easier.
Yeah. So I mean, in those days, Andy, when things weren't joined up, then, so for you to actually understand what a business unit was doing or not doing, that presumably that meant actually having to physically go on site and inspect the records.
Yeah, physically. Yeah, part of the audit process would be you'd spend the first part of the audit checking the documents for in there and checking files for records and information. And some people some people are very good at that and would have well implemented filing systems and could lay their hands on a document straight away. And some people would have a pile of waste paper in the corner that they rummaged about in trying to find a training record that proved that someone had received slips and trips training or had read the risk assessment. And all of that now, it doesn't take away the need to go to sites to check on activities and behaviour, but compliance checks can be done remotely. I can log straight in and see that someone's completed a checklist, they've done a safety walk, checked the warehouse, done the fire drill.
So I guess from your point of view, then what that's actually doing is converting your time spent away from just almost like dead administration time to management time then.
Yes, yeah, and it speeds up the whole process. If you want to make a change or you identify an issue, something happens, then you can update that information for everybody in real time now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And you know, obviously, you know, you've worked with BCarm for a while, so you realise some of those benefits. But you know, in your mind, and putting BCarm to one side, you know, what do you think are the kind of the key elements of, if you like, an operationally excellent kind of health and safety management system? What do you think are those key components to allow someone like yourself to get the most out of the organisation?
For me, one of the biggest benefits has been visibility and the ability for other people to use it to measure their performance as well. So whilst we've got the real-time training records, you know, using the dashboard system, everybody can see where their progress is. It allows us to run good reporting, again in real time. So if someone's doing training while you're reporting the report, you can actually see the data moving. But published reports allow, or published information allows everybody to see what they're doing. And as you said, they know they're being measured because they can see that stuff's happening, and their colleagues in another region are doing better than they are. The regional managers are getting reports from it and are then chasing people to say, why is region A got better reports than our region? And you need to make sure that you do all the stuff you've got to do.
So that's kind of quite an interesting kind of almost interpersonal competitive dynamic that you kind of realise from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And because all the data is identical, effectively, you get a direct comparison. People can't sort of, oh yeah, well, we've done 23 training modules this year by sort of splitting them down into multi-training sessions. It's all, everybody's measured exactly the same way. Everybody's using exactly the same checklists. Everybody's recording the same compliance scores. So if one depot is getting a 93% compliance on a checklist and somebody else is only getting 85, it's got nothing to do with the way it's being measured or interpretation. It's because it's hard questions. Yes, no. 95% is 95%. And if it's been a benefit, certainly in management time and consistency, very much so.
Great. Andy, thank you very much for sharing with that with us today. We'll be taking questions later, so if you've got any questions for Andy, then I'm sure he'll be pleased to field any of those. So what I'd like to do now is kind of reflect a little bit on how you can take that kind of friction and cost out of the health and safety process. And in many respects, you know, this is the territory of marginal gains, which we all kind of became very familiar with the exploits of Team GB cycling. But it is the province of management systems, and obviously this is something that technology allows us to do, and we're seeing this in every walk of life. You know, accountancy, legal professions, banking professions. There's a lot of systemization and operationalization, which is a new word I like, that helps us streamline process and remove costs from it. And I guess kind of from my view, the kind of the 6 big deliverables around purpose-built management systems that are designed for the purpose that they're doing, rather than using something like Outlook tools to build a safety management system, are these here. So they fundamentally reduce the number of process steps that are necessary to complete the task that's required. They give huge amounts of access and visibility across an organization, and I think any multi-site business instantly benefits from that, as Andy was alluding to there. MI and management information reporting just becomes an instant byproduct of the process. And when you look at any business or any area of business performance, how you manage it without MI is beyond me. It's a must. It also allows data to be shared and communicated very much, as Andy alluded to there. and it makes wider engagement easier for the organisation. It makes it easier to open up the process beyond just a few individuals. And ultimately, there is a reduction in friction and cost. And as I say, we'll look at a couple of examples of that at the end of the webinar. So what I just wanted to do now very, very quickly is just show you kind of what that might mean in terms of certain processes. So if we look at, for instance, a risk assessment. So, and I'm talking about BCarm functionality here. So, firstly, the risk assessment or checklist, there'll be a predefined monitoring schedule within the system that's sending an email to someone saying, right, you need to monitor this risk assessment, you need to complete this weekly checklist or whatever it is. So there's a trackable activity, a trackable visible activity. The use of that risk assessment or checklist then produces your audit, your safety sampling, and a performance score against the criteria. So again, we now have a measure of what's actually happening, a consistent measure, as Andy said, across the business. And at the same time, actually evidence can be uploaded into, say, that checklist to demonstrate actually this is what was checked and this is the physical evidence of it. So don't just tell me, but show me. All of that is then instantly available as real-time data within the systems that can then be used for KPI and management reporting. Linking in with that risk assessment or checklist is the ability to then define any corrective action where there's a shortfall. That corrective action can be assigned to an individual with timescales and priority. So that then becomes another trackable activity within the system. So corrective activity can be tracked, and again, it has the visibility around it. And management alerts within the system can also notify either when, say, a schedule is missed or when a performance level is missed, perform below a certain performance score, which again allows management intervention. So through the one instance of someone completing a monitoring a risk assessment, completing a checklist, it instantly delivers all of these other functions to the organization at the same time. So let's take another example, and this is accident reporting. So accident reporting, the accident report is completed. Immediately, additional information can be added to that accident report. So it's not just a piece of paper like an accident book record. So witness statements can be completed immediately with a signature, for instance, on a mouse pad, captured directly into that accident record. Other notes, other attachments can be uploaded at that same time. Any related safety records within the management system can also be connected to the accident record. That might be a risk assessment, it might be a training record, it could be any number of different things, but all of that information and data being pulled together. Again, Andy alluded to the challenges of that. When you have a claim and you have to submit it to the insurers, where do I find my records? That information then is instantly available to anyone else in the organization who needs to access it. So if we look at Andy's situation, Andy's based in one location and there are 17 others. So that information is instantly available to him. And it's also available to be analyzed as well from a management reporting point of view. Again, task management with corrective action can now be recorded as part of the incident review, and that then becomes trackable to make sure that that's been dealt with. And again, management alerts notify either when, say, an accident book record has been completed or when a task hasn't been completed, again allows that opportunity for management intervention. So again, we're not looking at lots and lots and lots of steps. It's all emanating from one area. Another example, this is a safety briefing, something we introduced earlier this year. So again, one of the reasons we introduced safety briefings was because we were talking to our clients who were having employees' liability claims paid when an employee had been trained on a risk assessment, but what they didn't have was a signed, received and understood training record. So training requirement for risk assessment checklist, but the Systemization work can be defined as part of the employee's training. Safety briefing can be loaded up onto a tablet with details of the risk assessment or the document to be discussed with the employees, the group of employees. Training delivered and immediately a signed and received training record captured for all of those employees, which are then immediately uploaded into the training center against the individual training record. And we've got further management alerts, which will notify when renewal is required. And then finally, as an example, so Andy mentioned about e-learning. So e-learning, if you don't use it, it's a very powerful way of delivering awareness training. Can't replace training around a heavy lift or how to drive a forklift, but awareness training, absolutely. And the drip effect of e-learning, we've seen with many customers, just inch forward safety, the old rule of 7. Human beings need to hear something 7 times before it goes in. So in e-learning, once someone has completed a course, which they're able to do under their own steam, that course includes a test and self-assessment. The system administration tools make the ongoing management of that training exceptionally easy. You can even email reminders directly from the system. Training data, as Andy said, is instantly available and live, so that you can see the numbers change over time. And that data can then be used straight away in terms of KPI management administration reporting. The self-assessment scores actually will highlight risks at an individual level, which otherwise would be really quite challenging to find out which employee doesn't know where the material safety data sheets are for their area of work. An individual action taken with complete audit trail. And also, again, management alerts, creating an opportunity for management intervention where specified shortfalls occur. So there's a few examples of where we're looking at, again, an employee completes a course and a whole range of other deliverables are instantly realized by the organization. And again, in terms of the sort of data that visibility creates, well, this again is a very simple report that shows the average time that tasks are overdue for different activities, so checklists, further action, or what have you. Again, giving you different measures of performance within the management system because it's collected out data points. And similarly, well, if you've seen any of our webinars, this is a similar report. This is just performance score reporting on a regional basis. This is live data instantly available. So let's just kind of talk about what this kind of friction and cost looks like. So I've got a couple of examples here to share with you, and kind of the numbers that seem to come out of this, that if you're moving from a kind of paper-based type management system, then the level of operational and frictional saving costs you can be looking at is somewhere between £150 and £250 per head. That seems to be a kind of a fairly consistent number that comes out. So this information you see in front of you was completed by one of our clients who's been bought by an American parent company, new American parent company, and so they're having to justify every item of expenditure. So their annual license cost is £7,000 a year for all of the services they buy. And in preparing their benefit analysis for their management reporting submission, these were the sort of line items that they identified where they would have additional cost incurred to achieve what they're currently able to do. So as you can see there, cost somewhere between £40,000 and £47,500, and that didn't include actually kind of reconstituting a management system in another format, such as Microsoft Office. So that's a reasonable return on investment if you're looking at, okay, I need to spend this, what am I going to get for it? This next example was way too much information on the screen, but I just put out the key points. So this was an organization with 700 staff over 7 locations, predominantly office-based, so lower risk. And in just looking at management time alone, so this is just management time, trying to keep the thing working, they identified management savings of 400 hours a year by having a proper joined up system rather than something made using Microsoft tools. And that didn't include somewhere between 2 to 3 days of IT support per month, which again has a cost, and didn't include the impact of using an e-learning system across that workforce as well. So that would have generated kind of cost benefit savings somewhere in the region of 75 to 80,000 pound a year for that organisation. So, you know, as I say, this is the stuff of marginal gains, and it's all the minutes and the seconds that are shaved off the process because we're only doing something once and we're immediately getting a byproduct from it that allows us to fill some other part of our management process. So just to kind of summarize then, to start off, my point at the very start of this was, you know, any risk management system that by its operation impacts on your ability to manage the risk and engage with the organization, needs to be looked at, and there will, as well as that increased risk exposure, there would unquestionably be operational costs in there as well. Operationalizing any risk management system will give you, 5 clear deliverables: greater visibility and accountability that will help fuel engagement, reduced admin time in favor of increased management time, which is obviously far more productive. That improved risk management and protection of the organization, and at the end of the day, that's protecting those retained risks that we can't do anything about, ultimately the value of the business. Reduced operational costs, which any organization is probably looking at the moment with the challenges we face in the current economic climate. And then that greater engagement, both by management, as sponsors, if you like, and not discrete barriers, and employees within the business. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for attending today. Izzy, have we had any questions at all?
Yes, so we have had a few questions, and we are on the Q&A, and we are slightly overrunning, so sorry for that.
I apologise.
What we will do is we just asked the couple of questions that have been asked, and unfortunately Andy did have a hard stop, so he is unable to jump on and answer questions directly, but for any of those questions asked, we will get back to you with his responses. In terms of the other questions, Steve, one was how easy or difficult is it for a client to start using a system like BCarm?
Some bits are easier than others. Some bits are incredibly simple. So e-learning literally is hours to roll out. 3 hours to roll out, to configure and roll out training to a workforce of 500 people is run of the mill. Other areas again take a little bit more time. So there's some setup, around, your operational structure and reporting structure, but we help clients do all of that. If the safety person has the available time, then within a week you could be easily be utilizing the e-learning system and have a good proportion of risk assessments uploaded into BCarm and being used for proactive monitoring.
Okay, thanks, Steve. The other question was, what support do you provide to get a company up and running?
So going back to my second or third slide, we provide unlimited remote support to get a client up and running. So we will help them work out how the best way to implement the system to address their issues and needs. So they're prioritizing different areas based on where they are. And we'll also help them stage it as well, so that they do it like a Gantt chart rather than trying to do big bang. But we'll upload their, we'll get their employee details into the system. We'll train them how to use different parts of the system as and when they're ready to use it. So, and as many times as they need that Zoom call, then we're there for them. Okay.
Thanks so much for your questions, and also for joining us today. And we are at the end now, so we hope you found it useful. As mentioned, we'll be sharing the slides with you after this. And you can also find more resources and insights on our website. And so until next time, thanks and goodbye.
Thank you.